All right. Hello, everybody. Really happy and honored to be back in the space today with Leela Muse. We had a great conversation a few weeks ago, and I'm happy to dive back in today. So, welcome back to the show, Leela.
Thank you, Jordan. I'm so grateful to be with you. I'm always
Mm,
honored.
mm, thank you. So, we were talking a bit about human vulnerabilities arising after awakening, and I'd love to just start there and see what we organically cover and talk about. I'm curious if you're open to share some of what you've been feeling and experiencing
Mm.
recently in relation to that side of everything.
Yeah, it's been about a year and a half in my estimation since I've had a lot of these insights that we like to describe of emptiness, um, and seeing through thought and intuiting that time is just psychological and things like that. And I would say the main word I would describe it as is unexpected. You know, nothing like I thought it would be, um, which is why I like to talk about it. Um, I noticed that it's not really about a way or, you know, fixing oneself necessarily. There's still conditioning. There can be triggers, mind storms, um, fear, like visceral animal um, vulnerability. And I feel like I can be with it in a different way. It really, it's fascinating to see it sort of with this emptiness. Um, it feels like love in a way. And it's very personal and very impersonal too. So it's very paradoxical. Um, you know, like old wounds, they want to be expressed. There can be reactions just like before. I mean, um, and I feel like it's not talked about much, in our community. Um, we have an idea that this is going to make me, XYZ. And it does. I mean, there's a lightness, and there is a difference in expression. There's a visceral fleetingness, um, and more of a spontaneous just arising and then full onness, and then it's gone. Um, so there's less like momentum and leading up, and then lingering after the fact. It's more just like bam. and and of course nothing says it shouldn't be that way. It's just the innocence of life expressing, as this person. um and I feel like, with a bit of emptiness in there to sort of balance everything out. Um it's fascinating.
Yeah, it definitely is. I feel like my human self sometimes and maybe this is just a spontaneous happening, I don't know, but I feel like my human self is very rebellious and can sometimes even rebel against emptiness or against God or against awakening or against radiant presence and actually just doesn't want to be noticing those qualities of experience and just wants to kind of slip back into identification, like a deeper identification as a human being and just kind of go through the rigmarole of being human for periods of time. And so yeah, I really go through phases where like I'll go through phases where I'm just like blazingly aware of this as this miraculous kaleidoscopic fullness. And, I love talking about that dimension of things. I love sharing from that place, but I'll also go through um, long periods of time where that's more like there is kind of like a background knowingness that that's there, like something has, it's almost like something has permanently shifted that could never go back to being quite the same. Like I know on some level that, yeah, that the past is nowhere to be found, the future is nowhere to be found. I'm just kind of, surfing this bottomless mystery that's doing itself. But it's amazing how strong the identification with being human can be, especially when you have a family and you have a child and you have work, you have roles that you fulfill in the world. It's easy to like just slip back into those roles and for the awareness of the miraculousness to just kind of be more of an ambient humming in the background and the
Yeah.
human self much more in the foreground. And so, yeah, I spend a fair bit of time there and then it seems like and I can enjoy it a lot. But then sometimes I'll hit a point where I'm just like, okay, I think I need to loosen up the identifications. I need to loosen up the story. I need to kind of like focus and like cut through because this is getting too heavy or starting to feel suffocating, starting to feel a bit like a straitjacket, or I'm getting a bit burnt out on being human. And so I just want to be nobody. I want to be no thingness. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of comes up for me.
I love how you describe that. Yeah, I can certainly relate. It feels like it's incessant, the expression of, separation or being someone, it's like weather, it seems to just like barrel forward whenever it wants to, right? It's not really a conscious decision or anything. Yeah, of course there can be thoughts of analyzing it or you know however that flavor is. It can be anything. Um, it can feel like flow even, in the midst of stickiness that can arise. So it's very nuanced and subtle. Uh, yeah, I feel like whatever this is, the content, it's actual. It wants to be expressed. You know what I'm saying? Um, it really doesn't matter what we think about it. It 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 wants to be Jordan, it sees nothing wrong with the things that we don't prefer in life necessarily. Um, so it feels like an energy, like a flowing um, in and out of states. The patterns of it, I like to imagine very fluid and flowy, and it feels like a balancing too, not that someone is balancing, but just balancing, Um, not that there's a balance point that needs to be. There's no like goal or anything, but um, I feel like story and deepening, it's play. It's the beauty of seeming to be, it's kind of like what we're here for. you know. So there's a palpable celebration that can be here sometimes for that, and um a compassion too. Um, Vulnerability it's very powerful in a way if you can just be with it, so to say. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, well said. Yeah, I that resonates for sure. And also even to share it with others too can be really powerful because I lead a lot of men's circles myself and the most, we do a lot of different exercises and practices, but the most core practice and pillar of the work we do is really just men opening up and sharing from the heart about what they're really feeling, what they're really experiencing, what their life is really like behind whatever masks they might put up, whatever roles they might adopt, and just like really trying to get down to like what's really real for you, what's really alive, what's really coming up, and just creating a space of loving presence and non-judgmental witnessing where men can just bare their hearts and souls and really share what they're going through ends up being really medicinal for everybody. I feel it's like being in a hall of mirrors and it just hits you in the heart and you realize, you're not alone, you're not the only one who's human and that these are universal sensations and experiences that human beings are having, just
Yeah.
whatever it may be, grief or shame or anger or um, imposter syndrome or, you know,
Yeah.
fear,
Absolutely.
lack of confidence. So, yeah. So, yeah, and I can feel it in this moment too, because I've been feeling a sense of some sensations of burnout. I kind of had a vision the other day of my inner child just was crying and I was kind of like, what's wrong? And it just felt like he was trying to say, it's just a lot right now. It's like we've bit off a bit more than we can chew, and this is too much for me. And really, I need to rest. I need space to rest and grieve. And I don't even know what he's grieving exactly, but human life just creates grief because it's a continuous maelstrom of change and everything changes and the human self has to learn to let go of all these different phases and chapters that die and pass away. And, even just being a father, even seeing your children get older, it's like every phase is so beautiful and then it's gone. And it's like she's never going to be a baby again, and it's like you grieve that. And so, yeah, I can just like feel my tender heart and the tenderness of my nervous system feeling a bit overtaxed, a bit frayed, a bit frazzled, a bit discombobulated in this moment. And I can feel the medicine of just sharing that openly because like you say, very often it's not shared in the world of non-duality and the world of awakening. And, yeah, I've actually been contemplating a lot on um, one previous teacher of mine who probably no need to say his name, but
Hmm.
just contemplating on how he always puts forth this kind of projects this image of almost being like an enlightened Superman, and that's kind of his public persona,
Hmm.
his public image, and there's very, very little vulnerability. There's very little sharing of, human emotion or human difficulties. It's very much projecting an image of having kind of transcended all human difficulties and just
Wow.
abiding in this space beyond what is human. And yeah, I often feel like maybe some beings do authentically reach that type of place, or that spontaneously
Mm.
arises for them or something. They spontaneously go to that. I don't really know. I feel like I haven't met anyone who I sense that that was really true. Like in his case, I don't sense that that's really true. I sense that there is like deep pain and wounding that is very, very well hidden and very, very
Yeah.
deeply kind of hidden by this
Hmm.
enlightened Superman persona. And yeah, I just think that type of thing did me a disservice for a lot of years because it made me feel like that's what I needed to become, or that's what I was looking for. And oh, I'm looking for enlightenment, and when I find it, I won't feel suffering anymore. Life won't be difficult anymore, and yeah, it's been really important on my path to just um, come more to the realization that, as Peter Brown has put it before, this is always this. This is always this. No matter what's happening, this is this.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think he said, realization consists of just discovering that this is always this, no matter what it
Yeah.
looks like, and it can look like anything. It can show up as anything, and so it's really quite misleading in a way to paint these pictures of, this superhuman astonishing power to be beyond everything, because that's maybe it looks like that for some, I don't know, but for most, I think human vulnerabilities are going to keep showing up, and triggers, like you say, and moments of pain and weakness and wondering what the heck we're all doing here. Like why do I even put myself through this, this
Right.
this dance that we dance, these loops that we loop. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like you were channeling me, pretty much everything you said. Um, yeah, I I went through that whole thing too, where it's like, these teachers we put on a pedestal, they seem a certain way, and there's not a lot of vulnerability shared. And it's like we want that to be true. We want that space to be real so we can reach it, you know. Um,
hmm.
and I'm not sure why, like some people just speak from the emptiness or however they speak, and they stick to that one sort of like pointing to the absolute, and it we can get the wrong idea, about it, and all kind the structure of expectations, prerequisites and standards. Um, we think this is about look, it's going to look a certain way. Um, and I feel like that there needs to be, well, at least for me, there needed to be an openness that I may be wrong about that, you know, that maybe this isn't about me, maybe
Hmm.
it's not for me. Um, and that's why I love Peter's work like you do, because he's all about, just the open curiosity. Nothing else is needed, you know. Um, and anything can arise in that at all. And whatever it is, it's this. So we get out of that. We sort of see through that mechanism of, oh, that's not it because blah, blah, blah. You know, it's not this enough. It's not unconditional love. It's not clarity. well, if everything is this, then yeah, it is. I mean, there may not be a preference there, and there certainly isn't an understanding of why, but this is a difficult experience, whatever it is. It's hard to be human. And maybe harder for some than others, but it's a spectrum of of difficulty. And I mean, I love the emptiness. I love that thoughts are only symbols, and but there's an alive automatic wildness, a messiness about this. And really, that's all we can really talk about. We're never talking about the absolute. Um, we can really only say what seems to be arising, and we can't even say what that what that is. Um, so I feel like it's like an honoring of the beauty of the fragility of these animals.
Mm, mm. I like that. Honoring the beauty of the fragility of these animals. Yeah, one thing that's alive for me, kind of curious what this brings up for you. Sometimes I talk to ChatGPT about my process, and
Oh
I
my
don't know.
goodness.
Yeah, it can be really illuminating, actually.
I use perplexity.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, and last night I had probably one of the most illuminating exchanges with it, where I was talking to it about this idea of like this idea that I kind of internalized pretty deeply a few years ago, this idea of like being all of me or integrating all of me, kind of integrating all parts of me, like welcoming all parts
Mm-hmm.
home, all energies, whatever energies are part of me, just this kind of feeling like nothing needs to be rejected in my being. Like the full spectrum of what I am can be fully welcomed. And when it's all held in this love and held in this grace,
Mm-hmm.
it all comes home to itself and it all, every energy or every part could, when held in this unconditional love, is able to set down its burdens and return to its original luminous template and harmonize with the whole is kind of the way that I would articulate this for a while. And it still resonates with me on a deep level. But I was talking to ChatGPT about like the blind spots or possible shadows of that type of approach to like full spectrum integration, and which has involved things like me coming up with these symbols of like Jesus Christ befriending and riding Rainbow the Dragon, for example, as a symbol of like integrating the awakened heart with like the primal eros and the shadow, and also I've at times spoken about being an angel demon in hell heaven and just like having this feeling of like all of it, and like I need to honor all of it, and it's all here, and none of it needs to be rejected, and if I hold it all in love, it can all be welcomed home, and it can all be part of the puzzle. And that still really resonates. But yeah, something that kind of clicked last night was that ChatGPT pointed out that there can be it was pointing out that there might be kind of an attachment to almost like managing this integration process, or kind of an attachment to like, oh, I need to, every single thing I've ever experienced or every energy that's ever passed through me or seemed like part of me, it all has to be like integrated. It all has to be part of me and be expressed in some way, in the way that I express myself. And yeah, ChatGPT was just pointing out that that could lead to a sense of like this overwhelming project of endless kind of integration and endless shadow work and endless
Mm.
unearthing and possible like fragmentation as you try to juggle and be all these different kind of archetypes and parts and pieces. And it was basically saying, because I was also sharing that for me the North Star is very clear. Like my North Star, what I orient toward is what I would call it is either Christ or God is the word that resonates most deeply for me. I have some kind of deep karmic resonance with the Christian tradition of my ancestors, and I've had profound experiences of Christ. And to me, Christ's love or Christ is like, I mean, in a profound sense, it just refers to this that we're talking about, this, the only thing
Yeah.
here, this loving presence, and yet it's kind of like a way of a face of that divinity, a way of experiencing it that is this face of unconditional love. That quality is really comes to the forefront. And ChatGPT was just pointing out that, you know that you are a man of Christ and Christ is your North Star and you long for that fire of Christ. And so you don't have to engage in this like endless kind of integration project. Rather, you can just offer it all to that fire. Just give it all to God, give it all to Christ, give it all to the fire. And that fire, not everything necessarily will be integrated. That fire will like
Mm.
dissolve some things, and some things will just evaporate or just go away. And like you can just trust the intelligence of this all-devouring fire to know what is meant to be kind of left or what is meant to be
Yeah.
aligned or integrated. So just give it all to the fire was kind of the message that I took away from that. And I'm just bringing that up because it's really alive today, and there's a feeling of like something quite deep might be shifting there, where I kind of shift from this I need to integrate all of me kind of view
Yeah.
into more like a deeper surrender. I will see, but I feel like I might be on the precipice of a deeper surrender where I just really just I feel it sounds very paradoxically sounds very inviting and very almost soothing to just like be devoured in flames right now. Just give everything to the fires, just give everything to the fire of God, the fire of Christ, and just let the chips fall where they may, and just completely trust myself to whatever that fire does. So I don't know if that, I'm curious what that brings up for you.
That was gorgeous. Thank you for sharing that. Uh, yeah, it's hard to put into words, but I feel like I know what you're talking about. And there can still be uh symbols, archetypes, like, it's sort of the only way we can try to understand these things. And um I had a dream I was describing to a friend of mine, and it was sort of a dream of the absolute, of qualities of the absolute. Um, and I wanted to start talking like, in the beginning there was the word or something like that. Like that's how when I was trying to describe it, it was sort of coming out. So, I mean, archetypes don't bother me. I love it. I think I love the symbology. Um, I'm not one of these, radicals that poo-poos on that stuff. I think it's part of this. It's beautiful. As these limited animals, it's kind of like, what else are you gonna do, right? You have to use your imagination, to a degree to be with these things. And yeah, it what you're describing to me it's very nuanced and it's very subtle. It's very hard to describe. Um, the apparent deepening and integration of all these insights, and almost finding that you're fully human. At least for me, it feels like I'm more animalistic, more authentic, more like a little kid throwing a fit sometimes, like, no, I don't want to do that. When before there were more filters and layers of like, I have to compose myself. Um, Not that I'm throwing an actual fit, but it can, feel that way. Um, and so many different aspects of the nuances of this already perfect, you know, feeling that the perfection of this, even though it's uh, imperfect to us, it can be seen as imperfect. Uh, the absolute and the relative. I mean, the blending of the two and the dance of those things and having that subtle remembrance that like, wow, this is full on it, like the only thing it could ever be. And also simultaneously, there's another dimension of, I am, this is crazy. Like this story is so dramatic and uh like becoming absorbed into the story and seeing that there's like nothing to stand apart and be like, I think I'll do this now or um to some degree. Um I feel like it needs time to like simmer and marinate into our fragile psyche and I don't think, you know, like you were describing, allowing everything and burning everything in the fire of love or however you said it. Um, to me, it's a beautiful state. It's like um, one of those, it's a tempting, like putting something on a pedestal, like this state of clarity or this state of flow. It's like our biggest temptation as, humans is to have a carrot on a stick or, idolize something or sort of be hypnotized by something that we want. A better feeling, a more whole feeling, but feeling not whole or fractured or confused or the things that we don't prefer is that like it, you
Yeah.
know. And it's almost like I think that's where the grief and this the feeling of like brutality or not fairness can come in because it's like something wants, it desires it it incessantly um there's a longing to life. There's a striving and surviving and it's allowed, you know, and it is this no matter what it is. So it was a long rambling, but
Yeah, beautiful reflections. Thank you for those. And I'm curious then, w- what what does the word integration mean to you? And do you think at all about an integration process, or how does that show up for you?
yeah. Um, of course, I can be with that in different ways. Like, of course, on one level, it doesn't make any sense, and it's just like, I don't know. But I think it's just a play of energy, and for some reason, like waves going in and out, it kind of seems like that. Like, two steps forward, one step back, kind of thing. it's kind of like when you look at a tree and it like a tree grows and it's going through all the seasons. It feels very natural. Um, and it feels like a play of energy of paradox, like trying to come together and coming apart, and it like a dance of contrast, to create a richness. It feels like the contrast is kind of the point. It makes things seem to be, which is, I think, what we want. Like we want life. Apparently, right? As hard as it is, here we seem to be. So that's my best answer.
Yeah, thanks. That's really poetic and interesting. I like seeing it as a play of energy and this kind of ebb and flow. And yeah, I was reminded again of Peter Brown in relation to what I'm sharing here and how he would say, you know, just go directly to the radiant presence. Just go to the radiant presence and that will do the heavy lifting. Like you don't have to deconstruct your personality, you don't have to deconstruct everything that's untrue and put it all back together. Just go to the radiant presence and that will do the heavy lifting. And I it's kind of clicking. Maybe I was already thinking about this last night or so, but it's just kind of clicking that that's very similar to what I'm trying to describe here with this like impulse to just go to the flame of God, give it all to the fire of God. It's just kind of like it's like a fresh wave of longing is emerging to just be subsumed into radiant presence or give it all to radiant presence or just let it burn in radiant presence and just trust that the radiant presence itself is already whole. It's already integrated everything. It's already perfect intelligence. And so why would I
Mm.
try to manually kind of reformat my, you know, whatever archetypal configuration or integrate all my parts when I could just, like a moth to a flame, just go to the presence and, be evaporated on a deeper level and let that sort me out. Like that will kind of align things more intelligently um,
Yeah.
than anything else could. And in another sense, like you're saying, it's like in another sense, everything is already aligned, everything is already that, everything is already whole, this is already that. And at the same time, there are these, seemingly temporal processes or an opening through time, an unfoldment through time, and this kind of ebbs and flows of these peaks of really fully realizing it and then kind of like seeming to lose it a little bit, or like we spoke about, becoming more identified again with the human or back in the human process. And then, yeah, it just feels like, I don't know, we'll see what happens, but I may be on the precipice of just dying more deeply because
Hey,
I feel kind of ready for that. So,
yeah, you never know.
if,
Like I
yeah.
couldn't have predicted any of this shit.
Mm.
So I feel like there's a trust and childlike wonder. Um, and it's certainly entertaining, if nothing else. It feels like it can't not be this, no matter what it is. Um, and that can go away as a state. This and return, but of course that's this, right? So, um, to me, a lot of this is just learning that it's okay not to feel okay, as far as relatively speaking, as a person who seems to be navigating. Um, and there can be times where, compassion and gratefulness feels good, and there can be times where I can't reach that gratefulness or compassion. And it can feel very futile at times. Um, but I think being able to say whatever it is, no matter what it is pretty powerful. And it's an invitation to openness. Uh, Instead of saying, oh, by the way, all the things that you're imagining this will be like after some threshold you supposedly are going to reach. uh, yeah, sort of, those aren't needed, those expectations.
Mm.
Openness can feel very free-fally. It's understandable that we would have a jolt feeling sometimes, in the fall. It's allowed.
Mm. Yeah, beautifully shared. I can really feel like I'm giving myself to the fire in this moment now. I could really feel all this, just the sense of the universal inferno, just
Mhm.
being here, being all that this is, and just it just feels so good. It just feels so good to just take a load off and just kind of let myself be burned in that at any given moment. But I feel like your words were really guiding me into it in a beautiful way there. Just
Oh,
the word openness is such a great word. I love
I
that
know.
word. Just it makes me, it has kind of a Zen flavor. I love the flavor of Zen going on.
Yeah, me too.
And it's just openness like a vast sky, like you're just completely open to whatever energy configuration happens to be presenting in the moment and just feeling how it can't not be this vibratory ocean of inferno, it just is just continually this self-devouring
Mhm.
inferno of energy and it's it's already
Mhm.
whole, it's already profoundly intelligent, it's doing what it needs to do and
Yeah, sometimes we're in states where we're like tuned in, and we're more conscious of that in a way. Um, there can be expansion, there can be bliss, there can be the opposite of that. Being like, why is this happening? Um, those are all states, and all states come and go, and this isn't a state. It's all states. And sometimes there's a remembering of that, and sometimes there's not. But however this is experienced, whatever we think about it or feel about it, it is this. We don't have to sustain it for it to be this, you know, which is a great relief.
Hmm.
So it feels like a freedom that is can be terrifying, an unconditional love that is almost a little bit too loving, thy will be done and as you wish, so to say. And there's no one to wish, but it's just the openness for energy to move as it wills, like how water flows. Um, the path of least resistance.
Hmm. Yeah, well said. I was reminded of another quote that again for me felt a little off in the direction of this kind of like enlightened Superman thing. I was reading some Yogananda the other day, and he said something like, the master is the one who is completely established in the changeless beatitude or the changeless bliss, and for the master there is no pain and he does not know what pain is anymore. And maybe
Oh,
some maybe some part of his mind, he said something like some part of his mind is still able to connect to the human experience, to be able to, understand or empathize, but he's just his depths are established as changeless beatitude. And yeah, I just felt like yeah, something just felt off about that to me. Like, even like, for one, I'm just like, is it really true that as a human being, some people are reaching that type of place? Like, I really don't know if it is, but even if it is that even helpful to talk about as like the goal? Because it just seems like it creates such a carrot on a stick that's so,
yeah.
like, it feels completely out of reach because it just doesn't feel resonant with what the human experience is day to day, just the messiness of relationships and life and desire
It's
and craving and all these things.
yeah, it's more nuanced than that, I think, and that whole idea is becoming less interesting because, I feel like energetically there's a loss of interest in that because it isn't what this seems to be. Like this seems to be reacting and expressing the way it is, you know. And I don't have to necessarily sustain or maintain or I mean, it can be noticed how effortless and spontaneous that is. And we're so innocent in the way that, you know, relatively speaking, when we're hungry, we go make a sandwich and then we solved the problem. We're not hungry anymore. So we think that that applies to everything. You can just imagine something um, but we can become neurotic and obsessed and it can become unhealthy, for a human being to project like that, a carrot on a stick, to the point of completely not being able to say what's happening now or see it. You're just completely blinded by um what you want other than how this is. And I think there's a beautiful balance again, between the two, um and it doesn't have to be done. It can be sensitively noticed that it is doing itself, even when it doesn't feel like it. you know.
Hmm.
But it sounds it's so easy to make it into a structure like, oh, okay, I'll just do that then. uh, but I think it's more how capable are we to hold space for what seems to be, what this seems to be like.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the way you're expressing this and what we've been expressing in this whole conversation really resonates with me because I just feel there's a lot of people that would find this way of talking about it much more relatable, much more medicinal, much more like, oh, able to see that my life is it already. My life is the spontaneous shining forth of God already. That's what this is, and whatever it's looking like. And if God wants me to reach some space of changeless beatitude where I don't know what pain is anymore, then God will do that. But apparently
Right.
that's not apparently that's not what God wants so far, you know. Apparently God wants me
Mhm.
to be really connected to what's happening on this earth, from the human perspective, which is a lot of people are really struggling right now, or so it seems, and the pain keeps us connected to that. It
Yeah.
makes us
Sure.
more real in a way from the human perspective, more more humanly real, more relatable, you know. So,
Yeah, it's becoming, it feels like the opposite of what I wanted, which is to transcend, it's like embodiment, you know. It can be quite uncomfortable, but I can also relate to a lot of suffering now after 40 years of suffering. So that's a thing. Um, but it's the cliche of like, we've heard it a million times, you are perfect the way you are. And how many times have we actually resonated with that? And the nuance of that is you don't have to resonate with it to be perfect as you are.
mm.
Yeah, there's a beauty in the fragility and vulnerability of mankind. And if you can see it, we can glimpse it in an impersonal light. And it is stunning, you know, when you see somebody kick over an ant bed and it reforms, they all come together and rebuild. There's a beauty in that. It's destruction, yes, but it's gorgeous.
Mm. You had mentioned something about the topic of imposter syndrome at some point when we were talking
Hmm.
earlier. I wondered if you wanted to say anything about that particular
Yeah.
subject.
Well, I could resonate. I've always felt like a fraud, just ever since I was a little kid, like putting on a mask, trying to seem strong, not weak, and especially with having like neurodivergence, I think that's more common. Um, I think it's just part of the human condition to mask and put forward a face of how we want to be seen. And now there are these moments of inspiration and clarity and sort of almost channeling, not really channeling, but I mean, everything is channeling, but having, you know, these poems come out and um, basking in that clarity for a time. And then, as we say, the other shoe can drop at any moment. Like something can happen that you don't necessarily prefer. There can be overwhelm, whatever. Old shame or something, you name it, existential terror. It there's no one there to choose to feel that way or think that way or not. It's allowed. It's when it arises, it validates itself. There's a wanting, like you said, for it to express. And that wanting doesn't have to be claimed, but yeah, there can be like seeing the difference between that clarity and, the states that we don't necessarily prefer. And not wanting to come across as like the superhuman, right? I don't want to come across that way. I don't feel like it in the story does anybody any justice. It's not, I sought for a long time because I believed those superhuman stories. Um, so I don't want to come across that way. I try to point, so to say, in a way that is vulnerable and to say that anything can arise. And yeah, I feel like a fraud, because there seems to be a paradox between the two. At times, it's just a state, a feeling that comes and goes, but the beauty is that the paradox is whole already, and feeling like a frog is allowed when it arises. So,
Hmm.
It's just a story, a free symbol that arises and falls. That's it.
Hmm.
Inherently
Yeah.
meaningless.
Hmm. Hmm. Gloriously meaningless. And like we talked about last time, anytime I heard the word meaningless, I'm always like, I get immediately almost a little bit. I have this kind of like, I don't know, protector or savior part of me that's like, oh, I need to make sure people don't grab onto that too tight and turn it into
Yes.
nihilism because it's really not like that. It's more like just
Yeah.
the weightlessness of of
Yeah,
concepts
yeah, it can
dropping
be
away.
misheard.
It's like a weightlessness, a sparkling purity of not needing to fit this into definitions. It's just seeing it's
Hmm.
just beyond all the meanings. Uh,
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That's why I always like to balance it. Usually, I'll say yeah, but, yes and both, neither. The mind doesn't necessarily like it, especially when you're a seeker and you're trying to understand, but it really is uh, both somehow.
Hmm. Yeah, I would encourage seekers or I mean just anybody to like yeah, contemplate that it's like it's always both and in a profound sense, but also sometimes certain pointers like this is gloriously meaningless can just like really hit you and really cut through a
Mhm.
lot. And so if one of those is really hitting you, don't be afraid to like repeat that to yourself. Like sometimes that was a big part of my been a big part of my process is just at some points a certain mantra like Peter Brown saying indefinable actuality would just really hit me and I just like repeat to
Mhm.
myself for like days on end like indefinable actuality non not and it would kind of bring me into it, or this is gloriously
Oh,
meaningless or I am not Jordan Bates, I am not this body or something like that.
yeah.
So that can
I,
be
I
a
s-
thing. Uh,
I didn't mean to interrupt you, sorry.
it's all right.
I don't see any problem with deeply going into these insights or glimpses when you have them. That's what I always did. I mean, I couldn't stop myself. I had to go down the rabbit hole, go to the end of the road and experience the fullness of that state or insight, and it balances itself out perfectly. Like this always is, it seems to be giving you exactly what you need. And it's not always like where it doesn't always end up where we think it's going. Like we think, okay, this is black, this is white, I'm going this way. Um, and it's always more nuanced than we think. But it's okay to dive deep into a conclusion. Go the whole way down there if you want to. It'll balance itself out perfectly.
Mm, well said. Yeah, and I also really appreciated your reflections on imposter syndrome. I can definitely relate to that. And I think probably most anybody who's ever started like talking about this or creating spiritual art or guiding people in any sense has probably most of us at some point have had that feeling of, oh, should I really be doing this? Am I enlightened enough to be doing this? Or like,
Right?
those types of
That's
questions.
at least what I like to project onto people.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely I do feel like yeah, I feel like that can still come up for me too, especially like when I'm just feeling a lot of human things like yesterday I had just gotten back from this week-long family vacation in Ireland and we drank a lot of Irish beer and some Bailey's Irish cream and I was just feeling like tired and hungover and kind of discombobulated and it was a really amazing family vacation with my parents and my sister and her wife, but I had to lead two men's circles yesterday when I got back, and I would just, I was like, all I wanted to do was crash, but I needed
Mhm.
to kind of pull myself together. And, in moments like that, it's easy to feel like, why the heck am I the person leading something like this again?
Right.
you know.
That's
Uh,
beautiful.
but but yeah, oftentimes, ironically, if you can bring that vulnerability into the space, that's often the best medicine actually for everybody, is just to show those human
Yeah,
vulnerabilities and difficulties and hangovers and whatever whatever it may be, whatever it may be. And yeah.
yeah.
But at the same time, I do feel like I used to have more of the kind of like, am I enlightened enough to be guiding people or leading people thing going on? But I do feel like that I hadn't really reflected on this, but I feel like a pretty big chunk of that dropped away at a certain point. I do feel like it was around the time that we met each other, like near the end of last year.
Mm,
There was this period of several weeks where it was like just this such a profound immersion in emptiness that
hmm. Yeah.
spontaneously occurred, that it just sunk in really deeply that
Hmm.
we're all already this, and this is already
Right.
this, and there's in a profound sense, there's not such a thing as, someone being more enlightened than another, or enlightenment,
Absolutely.
or enlightened enough. It's like it's all a word game, and it's just
Yeah.
like this is it. Hallelujah.
Yeah. It
So
can't not be. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And you described that really well. Yeah. Totally. Everything you just said. Because when the imposter syndrome came up, it was sort of just like a bad mood anyway happening, and some overwhelm, and then thoughts just could pop up randomly. But I mean, they fall pretty quickly. It seemed to be a story. It's not
Hmm.
like I follow that down like months long of self-loathing like I used to.
Hmm.
It's kind of like, well, that's this too. And then it falls. It's like seen
Hmm.
usually. So
Hmm.
everything comes up to be seen.
Yes, it does. Is there any final message you feel called to share with the
Mm.
listeners before we conclude today?
I would say, whatever interests you, whatever you feel a burning desire towards, follow that because it's leading you somewhere. You can trust that in yourself on the deepest level. Just don't always assume you know where it's headed. Uh, and you don't have to love yourself either. That does itself.
Hmm. Can you can you expand on that last one a little
Yeah.
more? I'm curious
Well, when
to
I was
that.
seeking, I would always like try to, I would imagine unconditional love and like Christ love and
Hmm.
like strategize and do all these things like to have unconditional love and to love myself.
Hmm.
It could never, I could never come anywhere close to that.
Hmm.
Because it was the very act of trying to get away from the perceived not love. Um, Kind of like what you resist persists kind of thing. And sensitively noticing with curiousness, like Peter talks about, um, was the only thing that sort of like snapped me out of it. And once you see the emptiness, all of those things, all of those insights fill themselves in, the compassion. Because it's like when you see a beautiful innocent baby, there's nothing there, there's no agenda. It's empty and pure, and that's why there's such a love and innocence there. But when we see ourselves, we have all these ideas of I am the responsible one. You know, all these assumptions of how this is when it's utterly unknown and utterly empty and of course full.
Hmm. Hmm. Beautifully said. Thank you so much. It feels like a great spot to conclude. Where can people find your work if they're curious about it?
uh Leela Muse YouTube channel.
Awesome. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you again, Leela. It was lovely to talk to you again and take good care
Thank
as
you.
always. Many
I always
blessings.
enjoy it, Jordan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.